Alright, it's another episode of Butt Crack Cycles. My name's Paul. This is my YouTube channel about old Harleys. My son Kenneth wanted to do the intro for the video today, so I'm going to let him do a little bit of that, and then I'll come back and actually explain what we're talking about. So, roll some Kenny footage.
Hello guys, it's time to start a new video about motorcycles. I have no clue which one it is. Oh, forgot. Hello, it's Kenneth. I don't know, we might be orange bike, blue bike, took it apart, destroyed bike. I don't know what we're doing today, but all I'm doing is hello, goodbye.
Goodbye.
I like football.
So today we're going to do a shop talk episode. This will come out on Wednesday. Usually on this channel, Wednesday episodes are moto vlogs where I strap the helmet camera on and we go ride around and talk about something in Harley land or like just motorcycle land in general. However, obviously my shovel head is in pieces, as shovel heads often are. My iron head's running kind of funny right now, so I haven't had the time to mess with that yet, and I broke my GoPro like 2 weeks ago. So I figured I would just do like a shop talk episode where we sit out here in the shop and talk about a subject, and our subject this week is basically a vintage Harley starter kit. What are you going to need with your first old Harley, and what can you expect with an old Harley after you've bought it? Probably the most common comment that I get here on YouTube in the comment sections is people saying, "Hey Paul, I just bought X, Y, and Z year Harley. It's been sitting for however many number of years, and I want to get it back on the road. Where should I start? What should I expect? What should I look for?" That is hands down my number one comment I get on YouTube. It's my number one message that people message me over on Instagram, and it's the number one email that I get at my email address, which is info@buttcrackcycles.com. I've actually already had a couple of those messages and emails already this week. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was physical things you are going to need after you have bought that old Harley. Obviously, you're going to need a set of basic hand tools. You will probably find that you'll need some specialty tools later on, but my advice on the specialty tools is don't go out and buy the entire catalog worth of specialty tools for your bike. Buy them one job at a time and see if you can borrow them from someone else. Some of these tools are pretty expensive. I personally don't really have a problem spending $200 or $300 on a tool, knowing that I will probably use it more than once, whether it's on my bike or a customer's bike or a bike that I've bought to fix and then flip. But if you're just doing this as a hobby and you only own one bike, it's hard to stomach shelling out $300 or $400 for one tool that you might only use once. So see if you can borrow specialty tools. But hand tools, you'll obviously need them. You will also need a torque wrench. I would strongly recommend buying a 1/4 inch, 3/8, and 1/2 inch drive torque wrench, one of each. Buy something pretty good quality. I wouldn't necessarily trust like a Harbor Freight torque wrench. Get something decent. Torque is really important on these old bikes. They vibrate so much and stuff is so easy to come off. You will get your money's worth out of a torque wrench. The next thing you're going to need is these. This is a factory shop manual, factory service manual, and a factory parts manual. These are your Bible. You can get by with something like this. This is a climber's manual. It's decent, but as you note on it, it says Sportsters 59 to 85. So there's a lot of information for a lot of different years put into a book this thick. The factory shop manual, this one is 79 to 85, so a lot fewer years. And it's in a thicker, bigger book. There's more information in the factory service manual than there is in the aftermarket one. The factory parts manual is great too. It lets you A, know what a part is actually called when you're trying to look for it, and B, the way I search for pretty much all of my parts is go to the factory parts manual, get the part number off of it, type that part number into Google or JMP Cycles or wherever you're ordering your parts from, and chances are you will have a much better time finding old parts for old Harleys by the factory parts manual part number. The last thing I would suggest buying is just a bike lift, a bike jack. This is something you can go cheap on. The shovel head right behind me is just sitting on one of like the $120 Harbor Freight ones. They're fine. Yeah, I would love to have one of the ride-on lifts, but I'm in a 12 by 20 lawn and garden shed. So one day when I have like a real shop or even just a bigger lawn and garden shed building, I'll probably get a ride-on lift, but for now, this is fine. It's good enough for me, it's good enough for you most likely. Now on to the fun stuff. Where do I start when I buy an old bike? I've bought a bike and it's not running. I had to push it up on a trailer and I'm bringing it home and I want to fix it up to flip it and sell it, or fix it up to keep. Obviously the first place to start is just look the entire bike over from front to back, you know, for glaringly obvious things. Hopefully you do that before you buy it, and if it has a cracked frame or it's bent or whatnot, don't buy it. But every bike's different. Every bike is going to need different things. So I just wanted to run down a list of like the most common issues that I have seen over the last couple of years of doing these old Harleys. So the fuel system is almost a guarantee on a bike that has been sitting. Chances are the inside of the tank is going to be nasty, or tanks, if it's split tanks, is going to be nasty. You will most likely have to rebuild the carburetor, and I would highly recommend replacing fuel lines and replacing any fuel line clamps and fuel filters. I often end up having to put a petcock in a bike. Generally, after sitting for a long time, petcocks will either gum up to where they won't flow, or they won't cut off anymore, or maybe the filter screen on them has gotten so clogged up that they just won't flow anymore. In any event, fuel system is pretty much a guarantee for any old bike that's been sitting for more than a few years. The tank's probably going to need to be cleaned out inside. Maybe think about resealing them, replace the fuel filters, replace fuel lines, rebuild the carburetor, replace the petcock. Next thing is just give the bike a good service. Change every fluid on the motorcycle. Change the oil if it has a separate primary, or if it's a Sportster, which by nature has a separate primary, change your primary. Change your transmission oil in this thing too. If it has an oil filter, change it. I don't care if the bike has been sitting with brand new fresh oil in it, had a 3-hole service done, and then it was parked 10 years ago. Fluids break down over time, and oil like develops acidity and things like that degrade its qualities of both lubricity and also, you know, cleanliness, and you can end up like eating away metal and such inside of your engine if you're trying to run oil that's been sitting for years and years. So oil's cheap, change it. While you're doing a service, it's a good time too you probably already have the carburetor off to rebuild it. Throw an air cleaner in this thing, air filter, whatever you want to call it. And I would also go ahead and put spark plugs in a bike that's been sitting a while too. When the spark plugs are out is a great time to do a compression test. It just gives you a general idea of the, you know, internal health on the engine. And speaking of low compression, if you have some before you go scrambling to tear the thing apart, probably a good time to do a push rod valve tappet adjustment. It's just probably a good thing to do anyways, even if the compression test's fine. Again, you don't know how long the bike's been since it's ran, and you don't know who the last person in there was. Maybe they did something wrong. It's just nice to know on something as simple as valve adjustment that really doesn't take so long, that it's done right because you did it. So that's usually something I do on any old bike after I've bought it and as I'm just kind of servicing it. So while we're sort of in service mode, we're also going to start looking for like low-hanging fruit on the bike. Stuff that's easy to fix now, doesn't cost a whole lot of money, but will save you a lot of headache in the future. Things like oil lines. Chances are the bike's old and you know, has a lot of years and miles on it, or it's been sitting a while. Oil lines have gotten dry cracked and maybe they're leaking and they're just grungy and crappy like this. Throw that outside because it just leaked on my parts manual that's sitting in the floor. That's one off of my shovel head. Let me grab a rag and we'll talk some more. But yeah, I have usually found that when, you know, you've already got the oil out of the bike and maybe you've got some other components and pieces and parts off, maybe the tank's off, carburetor's off, and while you got stuff kind of took apart, that's a great time to just go ahead and do oil lines, and that's something that will stop you from having a leak that might leave you on the side of the road, or worse, catch your bike on fire later down the road. So like I said, that's kind of like easy low-hanging fruit. That's also something really common I see on these bikes is the oil lines are just dry cracked, old, and just need to get replaced. Finally, to sort of wrap up the service portion of this, now's a great time if your bike is still equipped with points to go ahead and put a new set of points in. Get a good set of points, put them in correctly, make sure it's timed correctly, make sure they're lubed, make sure they're gapped right. Again, it doesn't take that long to do and points are pretty cheap. you might as well just know that they're good. Other common things that I see on old bikes, other than, like no-brainer stuff like batteries, tires. Some people will overlook tires. I don't care if the tire is not dry cracked and if it has good tread on it. If that tire is more than like 4 or 5 years old, in my opinion, it's garbage. I don't care if it just got replaced. If those are 2 brand new tires that were put on 5 years ago and then the man died and now his widow selling the bike 5 years later. Those are garbage tires to me. Tires just are not something that I mess around with. Y'all have probably seen me on this channel replace some tires that some of y'all would probably still run. I do not screw around with tires on a vehicle at all, especially not a motorcycle. And following very closely on that is brakes. Going is good, but stopping is better. I tend to now, after my shovel head, which this is the old master cylinder off of it, it's so gross in there, this wasn't even rebuildable. I replaced the entire brake system front to back on this bike. And I didn't even think when I bought it, this is just some stupidity on my part, but something that I've learned from, to like take a screwdriver and open the master cylinder caps on both of the master cylinders, and I would have realized, oh my god, this brake system is just trashed on this bike, and probably could have got the guy down a little more on price if I had known that, because that's something you can just real obviously point to right there when you're buying it. But yeah, go through your brake system. I'm not going to tell you what specifically to do. Again, this is a bike to bike thing. This is going to be, what your bike needs to have good brakes. Please do it. Also, when you've got your wheels and tires off to put new tires on, or to take to the tire shop to have new tires put on, that's a really great time to do a fresh set of wheel bearings and wheel bearing races, as well as wheel seals. I do that to basically every bike that I buy, whether I'm keeping it or flipping it. Hey Kenny.
Hi.
What's up, Noodle?
Nothing.
You still playing football?
Halftime.
It's halftime? Okay. You want to tell everybody, hey, it's halftime?
Hi, it's halftime.
Who's winning the game?
LSU's beating Oregon. They're beating them 49-21.
Wow, that would be a huge upset. What's LSU right now, 12th? 8th. Oregon's what, 2? Yeah, that would be a pretty good upset. Okay, and now this is my very last thing that I look at on a bike, and also something really common that I see, which is look over the wiring really good, because we don't want to fire. Wiring is something, and just like electrical work in general, is something that so many people have no idea about, have no business working on, and they screw it up all the time. I cannot tell you how many bikes I have seen, worked on, flipped, blah blah blah, helped friends with, etc., where the wiring is just a butchered spaghetti nightmare. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah, look at your wiring over on the bike really closely. Chances are you're going to find some previous repairs that were done incorrectly. People scotch locking stuff together instead of soldering, or at the very least using a butt splice with some heat shrink. People wire nutting stuff together. A wire nut does not belong on a motorcycle, car, truck. It belongs in a house. Make sure you don't have any wiring somewhere like where it's been rubbing, like someone has routed the wiring incorrectly. And finally, lastly, if the bike's been sitting a while, make sure that the mouse hadn't gotten up there and Mr. Mouth been chewing on the wire. Mice and squirrels love the installation of wiring, so I've seen that several times. I even saw a mouse build a nest in the cowl of an electric glide one time, which was crazy. But it happens when stuff sits around. Mice love to get up in places, and they love chewing on wiring. After you've gotten everything else taken care of and you're like ready to finally throw a battery in this thing and start it up, before you go hooking stuff up and hitting the switch and see when it happens, it's not a bad idea to just take 30 minutes or an hour or so and go through the wiring with a fine-tooth comb and make sure none of that has happened, and correct anything that you find there. Finally, speaking about mice, here's a wild and crazy thing. I've seen this on, I think, 2 bikes I've actually seen that have sat for a long time, maybe even 3 now that I say it, where a bike sat for a long time and a mouse has gone up the tailpipe with a bunch of acorns or a bunch of corn, and they have just shoved the pipes full of grain or seed or nuts or whatever, and you go and try and start the thing and it's shooting corn out the tailpipes. So take a second and shine a flashlight up the tailpipes. If the bike's been sitting with the air cleaner off or the carburetor off, I've seen that too, or like a dirt dauber or like a little house wren or something, or a mouse crawls up inside of the intake or in the cylinder heads and builds a nest and whatnot inside of there too. So again, if the bike that you just bought has been sitting for a number of years and it hasn't had an air cleaner on it, just make really good double sure that there's not something, corn, whatever, in the cylinder heads or in the intake that's going to get sucked into the engine and make you cry later. Might also check for water intrusion if it's been sitting like that somewhere where it could have gotten rained on. So that's where buying like a little inspection camera with a little flexible head on it might be worth doing there. Anyways, I think that's pretty much it. I sat down before I made this video and like wrote out like a short list. I sat down and just thought about bikes over the last couple of years and common stuff I've seen, and just like wrote a little list. It's actually taped to the tripod underneath the camera right now, and I've been kind of glancing down at it and reminding myself of what I wrote. So those were all the things that came to mind as far as like old Harley starter kit. You just bought an old bike, you've never owned an old Harley before, you don't know where to start. What are common things that Paul sees on these bikes? I'm sure some of y'all have some other stuff to add to that, and I appreciate that input. A lot of those things that y'all write in the comments about, man, those were all good things you said, Paul, but also, hey, I've seen X, Y, and Z, or I usually look for blah, blah, blah. Might be some stuff that I'm not doing right now and I should be doing, or you might just help somebody else who's watching this video. They might read your comment and be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea too. I should look at that on my bike. Finally, the very last thing that you absolutely 100% have to have if you want an old Harley as a project is some patience. Sometimes these bikes will make you want to roll them off a cliff. This orange one sitting right behind me has tested my patience a lot over the last year and a half or so that I've owned it. But it's just how it goes. Just have some patience and enjoy it. I think if you go through all that stuff that I listed in this video, you'll probably get an old bike to a point where at least it's road ready and rideable and you can go put some miles on it. You will most likely have something leak, break, come up that you just didn't know about, but at least if you follow that stuff in this video, I think that's enough like baseline, base level stuff to get most old Harleys to a point where they're like actually running and rideable, and you can go put some miles on them and feel that bike out, learn its character, learn its quirks, and figure out what you need to do after that. Because that's how these things go, right? You buy it, it's a basket case, or it's been sitting for 10 years, you push it home in the trailer covered in dust and dirt and cobwebs, and you spend a month of evenings and weekends wrenching on the thing just to get it to a point where you can run it down the road and ride it, and then something else breaks. But stay with it, be patient, be perseverant, take your time, use the factory shop manual. There's a lot of great resources on the internet, good websites, good forums, Facebook groups even, and of course right here, YouTube. There's a lot of stuff that I learn on YouTube. So yeah, if you're watching this because you're thinking about buying an old Harley, do it. It's so much fun. Like, I don't know, I probably would have better return on my money doing something else, but this is way cooler than trying to play the stock market. I don't know. Can't ride a stock. In any event, thanks y'all for watching. Thanks for supporting this channel. I will see y'all on the next episode. Yeah, we should have a Sunday episode coming up soon too. Should probably be fixing the iron is what I would guess my Sunday content will be. And then for next Wednesday, maybe I'll have the GoPro back up and going, and we'll be back to the moto vlogs. Of course, let me know, did you like the shop talk better than the moto vlogs, or do you maybe want to see me alternate between the two? That might be what I end up doing. Who knows? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just having fun. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see y'all on the next one. Y'all be good. Bye.